Hello, everybody. It's Vernā Myers, and welcome to Sundays with Vernā. We are very blessed today to have an opportunity to talk to Baratunde Thurston. And there are so many subjects that we are going to cover, but let me just remind you that Sundays with Vernā is a conversation series intended to heal division and leverage the power of unity in our country, created in the wake of Black Lives Matters movement to focus on learning and the connection we need to avoid polarization and better understand how our fates are connected. We wanted to move past distraction of division and forge community across their differences. And I have to say that I have been so excited to have this conversation with you, Baratunde. And let me tell you who Baratunde is, other than a person who I admire greatly and met on the come up. Would you say that you were on the come up?
You were part of my come up. How about that?
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So Baratunde is an Emmy-nominated multi-platform storyteller and producer, operating at the intersection of race and technology and democracy and climate. He is the host and executive producer of the PBS series America Outdoors with Baratunde Thurston, and he's the creator and host of How to Citizen podcast and a founding partner and writer at Puck. His comedic memoir, which is one of the ways I came to know him, is How to Be Black. It's a New York Times bestseller. And Baratunde is unique in his ability to tell the story of us, who we are, and who we can still be. So, welcome.
Vernā, it is so good to be here in the yard, hanging out in this
In the
virtual stream
yard.
yard with you. These internet streets, they're crazy. So nice to find you safely
And
here.
well, we're going to talk about all these things: race, technology, democracy, climate. But mostly, I just got to just start off with a little humor because,
Yeah.
these days we really need some humor. So, DEI is under attack. And I just wanted to hear your riff on it as a
Yeah.
Black comedian. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw some of the most outrageous comments have heard, and you
Yeah.
were just going to say one word, maybe a phrase or a quote,
Okay.
just right off the top of your head. And you haven't seen these before, so you know
No.
what can I say? It's the real deal here. Okay, how about the DeSantis? Black people benefited from slavery.
Yeah. This was a new take on the civil rights movement and American history. DeSantis saying that Black people benefited from slavery is probably the wokest take possible. It is so asleep. It's actually on the other side. And it's like flipping American capitalistic colonial thinking on its head to say that like
Yeah,
we actually won slavery. And so I don't think he really understands how twisted that he's gotten on that one. I just want to thank him, for giving us this new perspective on history. History is clearly never dead, and we're constantly rewriting it. And that was so
constantly.
creative, so creative. Yeah, this guy.
You gotta hand it to him on that. What about I'm colorblind?
Yeah, that's a medical condition. And I'm not here to shame people who have disabilities. But I also don't think we should like bring them into a discussion about racial equity. It just feels like they're two very different conversations. If that is something that can be repaired and people want that, then I want that for them. But if you are fine missing some colors, then I'm also okay with the world that is adapted to still make it usable for you. We should design for everybody, including the colorblind.
Yeah, that's inclusive design for you right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even alive when there was slavery, so how can it be my fault?
Yeah, no, this is one of my favorites. I wasn't alive when the wheel was invented, so I should probably roll around on blocks. I wasn't around when they made plastic or radar or satellites, so I should hand over my phone because I'm just not allowed to benefit in any way from things that I wasn't around for. And if it wasn't around for me, then it can't be around for me now. And that's a very consistent position. I've always been on it, which is why I am disappearing right now because I'm using all these technologies which came before me.
Okay. What about this? A Black woman took my job. Usually in the situation where no one had a job.
Black woman
Opportunity job.
took my job. And we had a long history of forcing Black women to do the jobs that people didn't want to do, up to and including raising your babies. And so I'm just confused. Like, do you want Black women to do the job? Now the women are signing up to do the work. That's a huge leap forward. That is like major progress. Like Black women volunteering to do the job. I think people should be proud of that. And we've all come such a long way. You for not forcing people to do jobs, and us for actually getting paid to do them. It's one of those win-win situations. I think people are just looking at it a little confused.
That's so good. One other thing I will ask you is,
Yeah.
and this is actually on the serious tip, this one makes me really upset, which is DEI is anti-Semitic.
Oh, that one is interesting to me. DEI is anti-Semitic is not true on the face of it because it's not trying to exclude or suppress or traffic in tropes and anti-Semitic mythologies and stereotypes. And so the people saying that about DEI, I think, are probably overstating it. So I read this long piece, Vernā, in the Atlantic by Dara Horn, which goes through this really deep history of anti-Semitism. And it is centered, Dara is a classmate of mine at Harvard, and it's centered on the experience at Harvard University. She was on Claudine Gay's, the former president's, anti-Semitism committee. And she talks about how some anti-Semitic tropes have found their way into the academy. At the same time, there's a high percentage, a disproportionate relative to the population of the country, larger percentage of Jewish students at Harvard than not. So from an admissions perspective, there had been a history of exclusion, right? Explicitly, right alongside us and women folk and a whole bunch of other people. Jews need not apply. You're not allowed. All the scary tactics. Then a big movement that Black folk helped lead, that women helped lead, a whole multi-coalition. And we all benefit from that, including Jewish people. And Harvard got rid of those covenants and started letting more Jewish people in, to the point where I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it was high. It was a really, really high number. They've come down a bit since, and I don't know the details of that. But I do know that when we're talking about DEI, that statement that DEI is anti-Semitic gets really rich, because how are we defining DEI? What's the measurement we're making? And in the specific case of Harvard, if you're looking at admissions in the recent history, like past several decades, probably not a big issue of Jewish exclusion in terms of the numbers.
Yeah. Well, obviously, when you're doing it well, yes, there is space and opportunity to not just talk about it, but as you mentioned, to learn about it, because a lot of people don't really know about anti-Semitism, and it's like almost all racism or all biases that people can be anti-Semitic without even knowing what it is.
Absolutely,
right? Because they have just really gotten overwhelmed by quiet messages that are nevertheless very harmful. So thanks for making that distinction. And you brought up Harvard, and you just got elected Marshall of class of '99. My congratulations, my fellow alum. And a lot of the anti-DEI sentiments, I don't know if they didn't originate there, but they certainly got a lot of mileage after all of down there. And so how are you thinking about it in particular, like what is at stake if we continue to allow for this kind of anti-DEI sentiment?
So what I'm feeling and seeing is a lot of pain and a lot of collateral damage, often willful, because the moment of the fall 23 into the winter 23 into spring of 24 that we've been in has been taken advantage of by folks who have often no interests in DEI or anti-Semitism. Right? They're not
Right.
trying to make the world safer for Jewish people. They're not trying to make the world more equitable for historically excluded people. And they're sensing a political opportunity to divide and to pit historic coalitions against one another. And in the case of Harvard, I'm seeing a lot of that play out. There's been a lot of outside agitation, foisted atop of some real internal pain and incidents. I mean, I've read way too much of the student newspaper. I cited Dara's piece, which gave some very particular flavor to what forms of anti-Semitism had actually been playing out on campus beyond members of the House overstating things. There were really, truly horrible things being said or done just because students were Jewish, not because they were standing for Israel's bombardment and military activities in the Palestinian territories. So that's something that needs to be addressed. I spoke with some undergraduates at the university. I wrote a piece about this in Puck. And, when I was asking when Claudine Gay was still in office, I asked, how do you all, what is your perspective in terms of your friend group? They were like, she's trying. She sent too many emails. She missed the mark a lot of times. But I feel like her heart's in the right place. She's not anti-Semitic. And this was a Jewish undergraduate student, which doesn't allow them to speak on behalf of everything, but they would be more sensitive to it than not. So I defer a little bit on that interpretation. Yes. But some of those legitimately hurt feelings, some bad communication, some confused policy, and some disastrous testimony on the Hill got flipped into an attack. And so under the cover of like defending Jewish students, people attacked Black students, attacked women executives, attacked the effort to make more opportunity possible for the people on whose unpaid labor this great university was in part established. Pause for some hydration.
I sometimes wonder how tried and true old tactics like divide and conquer can still be so effective. Like, it seems that we should be like, we know that one. That's divide and conquer. We're not going to fall to that, right? But it really, I don't know, it calls out to some of like our worst instincts, which I think is just fear-based. And so, and this idea that we only, it can be you or it can be me, but it can't be both of us. And, I need to fight for my space. And I truly, truly wanted to think with you about this incredible project you have, which is How to Citizen. And I'd like you to share about what that is all about. But part of that to me is creating enough of a community, enough of a collective responsibility for people to see their vested self-interest, like how they are interconnected rather than only out for themselves or for their own survival, knowing that if we don't all survive, nobody survives. But tell me more about what you're doing with How to Citizen and what it means, what motivated you.
What we're trying to do with this is help us live together better. When I boil down my work, I'm a storyteller. I don't implement that many things. That's more in your department, Vernā. I talk pretty and I try to paint with words stories of us, like capital U, capital S, stories of interdependence. And that can show up in our relationship with nature, in our relationship with technology, in our relationship with each other. And in that last category, our relationship with each other, that's where How to Citizen lives. It started as a podcast. It started as some lessons from my mom growing up in DC and seeing her show up in more than explicitly political ways, but in a spirit of small d democracy, in community, going to community meetings, vigils, going to rallies, helping out neighbors, signing me up for things I had no intention of doing, but just like volunteering me for various forms of service, cleaning up at the block party, running the phone tree for this, manning the table for that, and doing community service even, and feeling a part of, right? It's not just me, it's not just us. We live on this block, we live in this hood, we're in this city, on this planet, in this galaxy, and we're all a part of something greater than us. And so those lessons, you're never too young to start them. And we seem to forget them quite often because we get a lot of messaging that isolates us, from each other and even from ourselves. Just shove the market in there instead. You don't need a relationship. You need a transaction to meet that need. You just need to spend some money. Sign up for this subscription service, which you'll forget
or
about.
relationships are right. Or like relationships are costly. They take too much time, and you could be off doing something else.
Yeah.
I feel like the more wealth you have, the more individual you feel, and more capable of like living a separate life and not having to worry yourself with the issues of the others.
Yeah. There's something to that. And I think, at all parts of the economic spectrum, there are incentives to isolate that the system creates. When you have little to no means, there's no time. You're so busy working, just trying to stay on the treadmill, that the idea of using citizen as a verb and showing up for community, and you're just working 4 or 5 jobs and managing illness and taking medicine if you have access to it, and medicating in other ways if you don't, to like handle the pain of the isolation of trying to bear the weight of society on your back by yourself. Because people of means can opt out of some of the common safety net that we shredded for everybody else. And so the money insulates from the effects of isolation, but it doesn't allow us to fully escape. In fact, it can deepen it, to your point, because then it becomes a substitute for some of that relating to humans, where it's like, I'll just pay a human to do that and not have to be in relationship with them to do it in service of productivity and output, which is never ending. It's an unquenchable thirst. And I am so subject to it. I mean, the number of YouTube videos I've watched about productivity hacks, I'm in and of this culture. I'm as American as apple pie used to be. I'll say that the heart of this How to Citizen work is about trying to think of citizen as a verb, not an immigration-based noun, inclusive design, redesign of language, to see our role in this self-governing society as more than just electing other people to show up for us. And so there's kind of 4 steps, not kind of there precisely in our model, at least 4 pillars of what that means. It means you show up, it means you understand power, it means you commit to and value the collective, not just the individual, and you invest in relationships, with yourself, with others, and with the planet. Understanding there's not much separation between those two at the end of the day. So that was motivated by frustration, by bad stories about our badness as people, as a society, how we can't do big things, how we are just divided and at each other's throats. And there's other stories that are true, that would be more true, I think, if we told them more. And so this is like an attempt at self-fulfilling prophecy. If we see it more, we can be it more. So we got to show it.
Yeah.
We got to tell it on the mountain and in the valley. So,
What, like, if in doing the show, what have you enjoyed the most and having this whole initiative? And then one other thing I thought was, what's the most unlikely ally that you've made, right? So we're trying to figure out how we are connected, and often there are stories we're telling about who people are that makes it hard for us to think of them as a potential ally or as a close relationship. So what do you enjoy the most, and who has been sort of a surprise for you?
Yeah. There's been lots of surprises across my storytelling universe here. I'm thinking about a man that we called Broadband Bruce. This was in our second season. Bruce is living in Idaho and in a conservative, semi-rural area, very red, according to the classic maps that we paint people with. And he and his community were trying to get broadband. And the powers that be weren't offering it. It just wasn't in their self-defined economic self-interest to get off their butts and dig the trenches and put in the infrastructure. And Bruce was not satisfied. He's like, that is not an acceptable answer. He was a dog with a bone. In this case, the bone was broadband. And he set about working with his community to build their own broadband network. Municipally owned, like by, of, and for the people. It was the people's broadband network. And he couldn't do it by himself. He had to work with homeowners associations, very suburban, that's what I should say, it's a suburban area, and had to make a case. He made a financial case. He made a moral case. He made an education benefits case for kids and work from home. And this was before COVID. Not that he saw something coming, but he ultimately helped position this place to withstand that shock better than a lot of others in their similar circumstance. And so Bruce, in my language, and maybe more of our language, he became a community organizer for broadband in right-leaning Idaho. And they did it. They built this network. It was very successful. It cost less and performed better than the market-based network. And Bruce is still a conservative guy, right? I don't know who he votes for, but I know the community he is of, and I can surmise some things about Bruce. And he was deeply interwoven into the world of citizening as a verb and democracy as something we do, not something we have, which is other language that we've found with some of our colleagues in this journey, including John Alexander, who I'm kind of quoting in that last one, a British guy. And that was surprising. It's like, I knew I liked broadband, but now I like Bruce, And, my America Outdoor show on PBS, I have found commonalities between people, not necessarily with me, but I think the other fun is where I am just like a hub, and there are these spokes connecting folks who are at the far end of the wheel, and they might never be in contact with each other or see themselves in the same place, in the same worldview. But because of the way we constructed this, because of the way the universe unfolds, we were able to collectively build a bridge. And so I spent a great deal of time with indigenous communities making this series. And that was like the highest honor of walking this land that we call America, which has other names by other people with a different way of relating to this land. And so spent a lot of time with them. Also spent a lot of time, I did hunting and shooting and horseback riding, crabbing and fly fishing. And you can imagine by some of those verbs, that's not a whole bunch of like liberal black folk that I'm doing all that stuff with. This is America, and it's America. It's at least two nations. And so I find myself in like a very conservative town in the Chesapeake Bay that is suffering from rising sea levels. And I also find myself on the South Fork of the Salmon River in what we call Idaho with the Shoshone-Bannock people during the traditional salmon hunt. That hunt couldn't happen because of the water being too hot and the salmon are being cooked in their own home. And the Shoshone-Bannock, they call themselves the salmon people. They are that much in relationship that the salmon are siblings. The trees are parents. And that is a real felt thing. And they were in mourning when we showed up to film because we couldn't do the thing that we had signed up to do, and they want to take these fish, and like tears in eyes kind of mourning. Meanwhile, other side of the country, I'm out in a boat with the mayor of this town, and he takes me to the coastline, and we walk along the coastline, and there's headstones sticking up out the sand. They did not put their cemetery on the beach. The beach came to their cemetery because of the rising waters. And he, with tears in his eyes, told me how he had to exhume his relative and move him to his own backyard. And that the thing that he knows, the place that he knows that defines who he is disappearing out from under him. there was a bridge there. Those two people did not physically meet, but energetically they met. And that was a surprising connection for me to witness the same emotional truth. They will use different words to describe what is happening. They will vote different ways on elections today and tomorrow. And they share something. And if we can build along that shared, even that single spoke, connecting to a single spoke, you get enough of those together, you got a wheel, and we can all roll happily into the future together, at least most of the time.
How has it changed you just being in these various places? And why are you doing an American outdoor show? Like most people would think, oh, you're from DC, you're from the city. Like, why are you outside doing these
Yeah.
things?
People from the city need to be outside even more than people from the country. It's got to get natural vitamin D, not just through the supplements. You can get vitamin D for free by just sticking your face outside in the sun. It's right there. We got to get out the shadow of the buildings and the shadow of our preconceived notions of what nature is here to do for us, to appreciate that. I've gotten that. I've gotten a deeper appreciation for relating to nature, more peer-based. I think, I've been very technologically astute for most of my adulthood. I started to try to become more socially astute with the people. And the How to Citizen Project was a big part of trying to level up and learn with all of our guests through that. And the nature relationship, I'd kind of let languish. As a kid, I was a Boy Scout. My mom was in the Sierra Club. Like, I wasn't just in the city. She got us out of the city because the city there was a lot of city. There was city things happening, drugs and gangs and all the hootenanny that can go on, even though I used a country word to describe it. So
I haven't heard hootenanny in a long time.
I haven't said it in longer, I am sure. I don't know where that came from, but I'm channeling something. So being able to make that show with PBS, no less, was a return home, grounding away from the digital stimulus and the intellectual life of the mind. It was embodied. I got back into my body. I got to learn in the field, not at a desk with a lot of hot lights. And it's really beautiful to, learn by being and doing and moving, not just by thinking. And every situation's a little bit different. And so you adapt. A desert is not a river, is not a swamp. And so they all require different things. And I still, this noodling in my head, one of your early prompts, like DEI is anti-Semitic. And I think, if DEI is defined appropriately, it adapts to the circumstance of the who and the why, that need to be in community better with each other, that need to find benefit for each other and the whole together. And I think, this show has gotten me to push that boundary even further, because even in most of the work I've been doing, it's very human centric. And it's like I'm keeping a big list. There's a bouncer at the door, a species bouncer, right? Who's like, oh yeah, for people, dignity, for people, healthcare, for people, rights to life. What about for trees? What about for salmon?
Yeah.
And we're that interconnection is not just a human one. We are nothing without the rest of the life that's here. We really aren't. We can't just eat Soylent.
Remember when we were just up in Northern California?
I do remember that.
In the redwoods.
Yeah.
Oh my God, redwoods are so majestic. You start just hugging them. You just feel like I did that.
I did that so much.
And I hear you when you say, did you? I did too. And I've only recently started to have more of an appreciation for the other aspects of nature. Obviously, I'm one aspect, and there is a lot, and nature shows up in so many different ways. I wanted to say one other thing too about this DEI thing, because in my mind, DEI is kind of the most generative thing we've attempted to do, which is to really create a space for everyone. That's the idea, with a recognition that that space wasn't available for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, can we get everyone in the circle? Can we get everyone to feel the dignity and feel the opportunity and to really expand and bring their best? Like, can we remove the barriers that keep us from seeing our vested interest in one another, and
Yeah.
instead of being off to the side, or instead of actually thinking that one group of people is more valuable than another, because we know ultimately our future is really based on as many humans as possible finding their gifts and being able to utilize them in a way that benefits all of us.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like,
It is
oh, the
that.
fact that people are trying to take it and make it something that we use against one another, when the whole point was to bring us all together.
And that fear-based response is someone wins when that message wins. It's
Yeah.
to me, it's important to almost every time. I try to remember every time and getting into this kind of zone of conversation. When backlash happens, when people are, we're pitting ourselves against ourselves, when I feel like I'm losing because some white woman got a job, or she feels like she's losing because the South Asian person got, like, we all lose something in that. And what wins is the preservation of that exclusivity. What wins is a divide and conquer
Mm-hmm.
mindset. And what wins, not even just in like the yay, kumbaya possible future. I want everybody to thrive. I think it's great. I think we all live to our best potential. We can have kale donuts and do ayahuasca, without trashing indigenous ceremony along the way for lunch. That's wonderful. Find your high purpose. And we have practical value to stand on here.
Yes.
There are too many
Yes.
problems of too much complexity in this multi-everything world for any one group to dominate. It's just, it will be a suboptimal outcome because we'll be missing perspective, which means we'll be missing customer
Yes.
segment, we'll be missing an innovative approach, we'll be missing some problem solving
Right.
skill. And so it is
We
in
need the
our
genius.
collective self-interest, right, to see the value of others, the value of us living in this concept of an ecosystem where everyone is valued. Like with nature, it's not so the tree can feel good about itself and the salmon can have a big ego and be like, look how important I am. It's because they literally need each other. Like the trees need the rain and the rain need the trees. And without one of those, they both disappear. And we are the same because we're
Yeah.
made of the same stuff. There is a biological foundational truth to our need for each other. There's a psychological and emotional and evolutionary need that we have to be together, to be in community, to be in group. And in our capital world, there is a financial value and benefit to figuring out how we do this thing more together than not. And on occasion, there are some
I
zero sum
agree.
moments, right? There is a job and somebody's going to get it and somebody's not going to get it. There's an admission spot and somebody's going to get it and somebody's not going to get it. But the creative opportunity is to expand the horizon and say, okay, I didn't get that one. Can I make one? Right? Is there
Yeah.
some other opportunity and value created by the expansiveness with which we think, where we're not fighting over scraps? The people who win when we fight over scraps are the ones who treat us like dogs,
Yeah.
doling out bits. They're like, yeah, you fight over those scraps, and I got a whole cow over here for myself.
I mean, some of the upset I have around this whole backlash is that the people who are speaking out about in an anti-DEI way are like people with the most privilege. There's not one opportunity you do not have. Like, are you really, you want me to believe that you're out there, saving others? It's hard for me to believe that. But I also, you mentioned your mom a couple of
Yeah.
times. I, your mom and your, what is it, your grandma. Like you've got quite a little legacy. And I want to hear more about your mom and what you learned from her and her background and who she was, and your grandmother was like what, like the first ever Black employee in the Supreme Court building, or
That is correct.
you got a story here.
Yeah, I mean, we we all have legacy in our ancestry, um, just by virtue of the fact that we're here. And some of that
Right?
is recognized, in institutional achievement or perseverance through hardship. But if we are breathing right now, we are part of some legacy, and we have some fortune in that, even if we're in pain in this very moment, which a lot of people, I know, a lot of people are. Yeah, I am not just me. I think that was an early lesson that I try to keep in mind, because I'm in an egocentric universe. My podcast is How to Citizen with Baratunde. My website's baratunde.com. Right? It's a nice name. I love saying it. And I like to be on stage, and I love talking to you. So
Thank you.
I am, part of a long wave of humans and other life energies that showed up in
Mhm.
this little pudgy baby in 1977. And I was raised by my mother and a bit of my older sister, Belinda. I was created by my mother, Arnita, and my father, Arnold. And that was in Washington, D.C. And those two came from D.C. themselves, both born and raised, as well as, my mother's parents, both born and raised in D.C. And the grandparents were the ones to come. So I'm third generation Washingtonian. And yeah, my mom
Mm.
was born in a tough time, born in 1940 in the district, and suffered through challenges and abuses at home, suffered through the collective challenge and abuse of being a Black person and a Black woman who happened to be born in 1940 in the US. And that just comes with a lot of stuff. And she figured out some things. She didn't figure it all out, and her life ended way too short. She was 65. Colon cancer ended up short circuiting her time here, but we had some good time, and she figured out her self consciousness, her Black consciousness, earlier than most. To be proud and not ashamed of that. She figured out the value of her relationship with nature and imbued that in me and my sister from an early age, even when a lot of us had been so severed from nature as Black folk. It was like, why are you going to do that? What you doing in the woods? Why are you going camping voluntarily? Is somebody chasing you? What's wrong? And she figured out some of this tech stuff. She was a computer programmer. And so I grew up in the wake of a lot of the lessons that she learned more painfully than I had to. And I was really fortunate for that. My father, his life was cut short. He was killed when I was 7, also in the district. A lot of beautiful things happened there. A lot of ugly things happened there. And yeah, he was, his parents came from South Carolina. Both of his parents grew up in a very, very, very tiny town outside of Orangeburg. And so I've had some increasing understanding of his family tree since the book I wrote, where I documented mostly my mom and a little bit of the grandma, her mother's story, who was the first Black employee in the Supreme Court building. Got the newspaper clipping showing it in the Washington Afro-American. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're multi-generational American Black folk. The trail runs cold, in terms of the ancestry documentation prior to her grandparents, and it gets a little muddy because that trail was intentionally muddied by the economic and dehumanizing system that created so much of the wealth here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we live here and love it here. It's all intermingled. We all family, and family's
Yes.
complicated.
Yeah. Humans are complicated for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're not just
Um,
one thing.
yeah. If I were to ask you sort of how they influenced what you're doing now, I mean, obviously the nature thing, you said you were exposed to that and brought into that, but what other things would you say have they sort of shaped in you?
Yeah. I mean, my sister was involuntary surrogate mom, and she did that well. And no teenager wants to be forced to take care of their baby brother who's 9 years younger. It's an awkward gap when you're just trying to be doing your thing with your girls to have to bring this little boy along with you. So I give her a lot of credit for.
Were you funny then? Because that might have
I
helped.
was so cute, Renee. I didn't have to be funny. I had the most amazingly big cheeks. Everybody thought I looked like Muhammad Ali. And I had the widow's peak just like him, big pudgy cheeks. I was not, a champion boxer, so that part they got a little wrong. But all my mom's friends and coworkers or peers, they they thought that was I was just the most adorable little thing. So that got me some mileage.
That
You
helped.
know, I tried not to abuse it. I was not. I don't think I was a funny child. I think I was really serious. And owing to some of the seriousness of my household with the mom I just described to you, we got silly
Yeah.
and had fun, but she was also like constantly schooling us on things that were serious. And like the history of
Mhm.
this and read this book and let's go to this meeting. How many kids go to meetings with their like we're going to a what is this meeting about? We just go to the meeting. Let's go meet and change some things and fix some things. Going to the meeting at the church, meeting at the community center, meeting at the so many meetings. So I do meetings pretty well now. I have a lot of practice. Uh, Mom's was special. Mom's was helped me grow up fast and slow at the same time.
I also heard that spiritually, your mom was open to lots of different
Yes.
religions and practices, etc.
Yeah,
How has
she.
that shaped you?
So I think um, the shaping, what has happened. So I try to give my sister some credit. She was a journalist. I think that unexpectedly shaped my leaning into journalism, though at the
Mhm.
time I didn't think it had anything to do with her. And then I'm like, oh, but she did give me AP style books as gifts when I was in high school. That might have had something to do with it.
Might have, might have. Mhm.
But we all want to think we're our own person. Like my big sister didn't have no influence on me. I'm me. I'm Baratunde. She's Belinda. She do her thing. So yeah, mom's religious and spiritual exploration shaped me in being really, I think, open to a lot of possibilities for how we connect in this world and explain this
Mhm.
world and find peace and healing in this world. I was baptized Catholic. Catholic Church did our family well. Gave her a discount on the tuition so my sister could go there. My mom worked in the office to pay off the difference. Not every school was willing to work with our circumstances like that. So she felt a sense of loyalty and connection. And Father East, I still remember this brother, the main dude at the church was this black guy in his beautiful robes. So her spiritual exploration gave me permission to see the world in a variety of ways. It in some other ways it like unmoored me, and that's mostly been a good thing, but not always. Right? I don't have like
Yeah.
a strong, deep, consistent faith tradition that I came up with, and the
Mhm.
community that can often come with that. Because one time we're at the church, then we're at the Buddhist temple, then we're at the Quaker meeting house, then she's tossing coins in the Taoist I Ching tradition, and that's all in a span of 5 years. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a
But
lot
you know
there.
what I noticed is a person who does that has a very open mind
Yes.
and is always growing and is into
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah.
And that would be you. I see that. I mean, you've got these things that seem unusual. You're like a Renaissance man. You're in so many different things that people wouldn't necessarily put together or even expect. And I just want to say that I think that that has been quite an influence. You also said your mother and your grandmother were travelers, tourists.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom loved to travel. She organized travel for us, even on very modest budgets. That was just car trips. Yeah. I got on a plane for a school trip, but it didn't go anywhere. It was It's like, congratulations, you on the plane, just right back where you started. But we did national parks, camping grounds. It was like $10 a night, way cheaper than a hotel. Days in, Best Western was the splurge, So that was a big part of my upbringing. And she would share stories of her trips, and she had photos, and it was a really big deal. I think she got to Mexico City at some point. I have those photos. She got to Marin in the Bay. She never did cross the Atlantic. I was the first in our small group to cross that ocean, and I went to Senegal after my senior year in high school, and that was a big deal. She really would have loved to come. We did not have the funds for both of us to go, so she was like, "You go," and I took all the pictures, which I also got from my mom. She was a great photographer, and gave me great cameras, and I learned how to develop film with her and one of her good buddies who was a professional photographer and bicycle courier and bassist and cellist and flautist. And so I don't know, you're getting me all in the memory field
I
here. I'm getting a
know,
little
in the
lost, but
nostalgia, but it reminds me of when I was the first person in our family to also go across to the Atlantic. I went to Cambridge,
yeah, wow.
and my dad, this is what my dad said when I left. He said, because you got to remember I'm much older than you are. So he was like, don't call home, send postcards, because it used to cost quite a lot to
Yes.
make a long distance call. And I felt like, oh, but I should be doing this. He's like, no, at first I had to work 2 jobs. I was trying to make the money to go. And then finally I came up short, and my dad said, I can give you some money. And I was thinking, but you don't have any money. And he said, I do have something I saved in my account, like in the, it attached to his job. And I said, really? And I said, I can't take that money. That money's for the family. He goes, you go for the family. No one else
Mm,
has ever been.
yeah.
You go to the family, just don't call.
Renee, I love that
Right?
story.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
It was
for
the
adding
first
that.
plane I'd ever been on. It was quite amazing. And then I was
Yeah.
in Cambridge, and I went to summer, and I had a paper route. It was so life-changing for me. But it was just my father. And I think our parents often are just, we are the manifestation of many things that
Yeah.
they've hoped for and worked for. And so it's really exciting. It's really exciting when you can do that for them. I wanted to ask you, so it's 2024,
I've
and
heard.
we are
Yeah.
headed into the election of what a lot of people are saying, the election of our lives. Tell me what you're thinking when it comes to, I mean, we know we're supposed to vote. We know we're supposed to do various things we're supposed to show up, maybe with campaign, maybe, I don't know. What else? So, first of all, how are you thinking about where we are right now?
Yeah.
And what do you tell people who want a citizen? I guess no matter what their party is, but of course I have a choice, but I may not anyway. Tell me what to think, how to live.
So this is a mess of a year. It's not like some of the other years, which weren't, a walk in the park or a cakewalk by any stretch. But we had some very unique circumstances in 2020, and we no longer have those same circumstances. Most people are exhausted. Few are inspired. There are some who are inspired about their candidate, not my candidate. Um, and there's a lot of challenge with the implications of that inspiration, for all of us, just in terms of the things we experienced already in the
Yes.
first term. So I think it's just important to acknowledge that we are starting from an energy deficit going into this election, and the same old of get out the vote and let's go team. Like, ain't nobody feeling that. It's just, we're not there. And I think it's self-defeating to not acknowledge the feeling. that's in the air. So I'm going to just acknowledge that feeling. If you're feeling like, oh, what? How is it? We just did this. We literally just did this. Like with these two, we just did this. It's not deja vu if it's the same thing, actually, for real. And so you're not crazy. I'm not trying to gaslight you on like, hey, this is an exciting new season for democracy. It's like, no, it's weird. It's really weird. And that's okay. And so we got to find, I've been trying to find other forms of motivation that are authentic to me and to the moment. Occasionally been very inspired by candidates. I've been more inspired when I'm tapping into like the deeper possibility of what we can do and who's speaking to that part of us and reminding us that's part of why the How to Citizen thing even exists. It's not just about the electoral outsourcing. It's the insourcing. Like, okay, what do I do on a Wednesday? Elections on a Tuesday. What do I do on the Wednesday and the Sunday and the Saturday? And I can't vote. That'd be extraordinary voter fraud if I voted 7 days a week. And that's not a thing, by the way, voter fraud. Not really. But there are other ways to practice and be in democracy, in community, to citizen. And so I'm just trying to focus on that and amplify that. And the stories of the broadband Bruce is one example of that. There's folks in rural Alabama doing amazing things. There's folks in Brownsville, Brooklyn doing things with public safety. And they're all interconnected. So how do we recognize not just the obligation of like, you should, the you should comes with a finger pointed at you. And that has patronizing energy and condescending energy and holier than thou energy and shame energy that are not the most effective for getting people to move, to do, to be, and to act. So how do we invite, right? How do we model? How do we celebrate and remind, like, what are we doing this for? What do we, wherever you are on the colorful map of our tricolor electorate that has been so reduced, we are not here for the electeds. They're here for us. And it's just so important to remember that.
Somebody needs to tell a certain politician that.
Probably many of them. I am willing to bet all the money that it is not a certain politician who needs to hear that. It is most.
Many.
And this system, needs to constantly remind not just them, because that's more finger pointing.
Yes.
But us. We need to remind ourselves that this is about us, and that we're capable and that we can practice this stuff, and that even the things that we most despise and detest in a politician, guess what? That's us.
It's in us. All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. We have 41 million, apparently, Gen Zers who are going to be, eligible to vote for the first time. And what are you seeing in that generation?
Oh, man, I'm seeing fire. I'm seeing impatience. I'm seeing kids who've been through some things. I was speaking with Nsé Ufa recently. I don't think she'll mind that I drop her name on this point. She worked famously with Stacey Abrams and the New Georgia Project to help activate a wholly forgotten part of the electorate in that state. She is a certifiable genius and lovely to boot, and just like positive booming, beaming energy. And we were talking about the Gen Z situation, and part of her perspective was that these kids have, they've been through, just acknowledging what they've been through. They haven't known all this peace stuff, all this peace dividend stuff that a Gen Xer might know or a boomer might know. And so the story starts in a very different place for them. It starts with a financial collapse and Occupy, and it goes through like living wage battles, and it goes through genocides in Darfur, and it goes through obviously COVID, and it goes through school shootings after school shooting after school shooting. Even if you didn't go through a school shooting, you got prepared for a school shooting.
Right.
That's,
oh my God.
That's traumatic.
So true.
So they've all
So
been
true.
through a school shooting. They've simulated it, right? And that's not healthy. That's not normal. And they would be very right to be like, hey, give me the keys. Give me just I'm gonna need you to
Y'all don't know what you
pull over. I need you to pull over, put your hands on the wheel, and reach slow. I want you to reach slow now. I want you to give me them keys. We're gonna take this. We're gonna take this. You can stay in the car, right? But we need to be driving now because it's our future that all these decisions are about, and y'all are messing it up. You are messing it up. And if you just let us help you, if you just tap into us, I see a lot of eagerness, and I see a moral outrage. I see a lot of moral outrage from these kids who, know better than do as I say, not as I do. And it's like, we see you. We see what we had the TikTok anti-racist lessons during COVID. So we see all that. And then we gave us all phones. So now we see wars playing out in the palms of our hands. We see that. We see the over-prescriptions. Like, we see a lot of the cracks. Yeah. And they've got, not, again, it's hard to speak broadly about a whole generation, but many of the young folk that I've had the privilege of being around lately are just like, they're about it. They're like, okay, like, that's cool. So you had a problem with that. We'll fix it. There's a group called Civics Unplugged. I'm on their board. They're Gen Z co-led, right? They mostly run the organization themselves. Thousands and thousands of alumni now have gone through this fellows program, building stuff, like implementing solutions, working in their communities, solving things. And they'll just show up to like the city or the thing, and they'll be like, oh, your website's trash. Here, I fixed it for you. And that's, if we can harness that and invite them in, as opposed to the finger wag, why don't you do it the way we did it?
Yeah.
We are like, if someone doesn't do the thing that needs doing the way we know how to do it, then we act like they're not doing anything.
Absolutely.
And that is perpetual, that's not unique to Gen Z. That's every generation ever. It's like the kids these days.
I know. And if you study another DEI principle, generational diversity, you know that every person in the generation makes perfect sense based on the generation that they went through. Whatever was happening, the context, the history, whatever. And I believe and hope that we will make space for their ingenuity and their creativity and their anger and all of the things that they come with, because I believe there is another way.
Absolutely.
And if we create a space for people to bring themselves to a solution, and it's not going to be easy, but it's almost impossible if we do the finger wagging or if we do the shame and the blame and attack. We somehow have to find those bridges and those connections and those commonalities, not ignoring the differences or the problems, but really trying to find the leverage we need to see ourselves as a full society, dependent on one another. And my hope is that you will continue to do all your amazing things and generate all the fabulous things you're doing, because I think your openness and your open mind and the ways that you approach things can be a model for folks who are looking for a different way. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for creating and holding this beautiful space. This has been a joy. Thank you. I'm so glad to have learned a bit more about you as well, especially your do this for the family. Go abroad. Please don't call. Please don't call. I love that.
I did too.
He did all of that with love.
Bye, darling. I hope you get some rest. And
Will. I will.
Okay.
All
And
right.
take care, and we'll stay in touch.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow me at Vernā Myers on Instagram and Twitter. You can also listen to my podcast on Spotify and Apple Music. Subscribe to my channel and share this episode with someone who is going to join us in this space. Make sure to visit my website for DEI resources and online learning courses at vernamyers.com. And make sure you sign up for my newsletter to stay in touch with me. Thank you again for listening, and see you next time for more Sundays with Vernā.